Good morning, everyone. Today, we have a special guest with us, Dr. Meenakshi Deshpande. She is passionate working in the healthcare sector. Today, with her unique background by studying in the Armed Force Medical College and is a graduate from IIFT from the batch of 2013-15. At IIFT, she made a career in a healthcare sector. Today, she is the senior manager at corporate strategy in Glenmark. At Cipla, she worked as towards building specialty portfolio for the US markets. At Deloitte, she worked on multiple projects for pharmaceutical and biotechnological companies with focus on go-to-market strategy, portfolio, and acquisition strategy. She's currently working as Senior Manager Corporate Strategy at Glenmark, and we are glad to have her today for the podcast series. Good morning, ma'am.
Hi, so nice to be here. Nice to meet you, Yash.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, we have compiled certain questions from which we would like to take your interview for. And so I'll be giving out the first question right now. Shall we start?
Absolutely. Sounds good.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, we would like to hear by knowing what goes into the managing several strategic projects along with multiple key stakeholders that you have worked with.
Okay, so I think I have built my entire career in strategy. So I have this experience spanning, as you mentioned, Cipla, Deloitte, and now Glenmark. How a strategic project is usually approached is very similar across the industry and consulting. The idea always is to try and get a perspective of the leader who's leading the project. In most cases, it is a senior management from the organization or the CEO of the company who usually has an idea of what they would like to accomplish with that project. So you get their perspective and you try and apply that perspective across multiple verticals. Because typically when we are looking at a strategic project, it is very often across the organization and it's very seldom limited to one single vertical, by my experience only, of course. So you get a very horizontal approach to the problem rather than vertically deep diving into a specific thing. After you get that, there is obviously a lot of stakeholder perspective that you need to receive, which would include usually heads of departments of different verticals, and gain their perspective on how they see the problem and where they see improvement and opportunities are. So the stakeholder perspective you try and get as much as a 360-degree perspective as possible for that issue. After that, typically there is either an internal team or an internal plus external, which is consultants that get involved in the project. And with that, then you speak to a lot of people, including R&D, products, and commercial folks, the finance folks, get all of them involved in creating a solution for the problem that we had started.
Indeed, ma'am, strategy is a fascinating field, working around different perspectives with people from different backgrounds. So, ma'am, the following is the next question on the same lines, that you have been involved in key strategic transactions during your time, especially in disinvestment as well as in licensing deals. So could you highlight parts of your experience for us that was especially on your experiential learnings?
Of course. So deals, transactions, and divestments are it's a large part of strategy, since they are typically high risk, high reward, and high involvement projects for the organization. Typically, when anybody looks at a project for licensing or for divestments, there are 4 steps to it. You would first try and find what is out there, which is scouting for opportunities, maybe as for partners, for products, or a company for an acquisition, for example. So that is the first step. The second is to try and find out of what is available, how much matches what you as an organization need. That is typically where the strategy folks become more important. You create a lot of matrices, try and find out as much about what fits our organization and pin every single opportunity there against that matrix. Once you have a short list, then you move on to step 3, which is interactions with those companies, those people, and start due diligence on their products or on them as partners. The due diligence is obviously strategies involved, but it is much more heavily reliant on people with niche experts in their own vertical fields, which is, say, marketing people, regulatory, finance, legal, IP. It is a whole large project that can go on for months. And then once you have an idea of, okay, one or two things that make sense, then you go into the deal structuring mode, which is more heavily reliant on the legal folks and on the finance folks to put a deal in place. This is typically a very funnel shaped approach. You start with a lot, end up with probably one or two if you're lucky. Sometimes you end up with nothing at all, and you restart your process of analyzing. Uh, yeah, and strategy usually plays the role of a continuous thread through all of these processes and act as the center of control for all of this.
That sure sounds exciting, working with so many different people in field, on field, and at the same time, you're exploring the strategy thread that is the common throughout. So I guess there's overall development as on personal level as well.
Of course, it is. It has been very rewarding, and of course, I have IFT, my alma mater, to thank for that. It gave me some opportunities to build up, and obviously, through placements, landed me up with Cipla, which again furthered the foundation that was built at IFT.
The next question is on a little bit on similar lines regarding your experience. So it has two parts to it. The first being that you have experience working in product-based companies and consulting companies. So how do you think professional requirements differ in both cases? And the second part to it is that since you have worked in extensively in the field of strategy with focusing on GTM, portfolio and acquisition strategy, so can you accentuate the nuances of each with focusing on adopting what can be the right strategy when the situation has high stakes in it?
So obviously these are very interesting questions. I'll take your part one first, which is product-based organizations versus consulting organizations. Obviously they differ quite a bit in their approach because consulting is very intense. It is short-term projects. You get a very narrow view of a problem, but you dive very deep into it. So you understand the nuances of every problem quite a bit before you suggest something to your client. Whereas in a product-based organization, the problem statement is usually very wide, and you have, as a person working in the organization, have to figure out what are the possible ways that that problem can be solved. Typically, for a product-based company, it is the internal strategy team or the internal folks who are looking into that problem statement who identify, okay, if there are solutions that range from A to Z, only the first three could be potentially useful in this situation. And you give that to the consultants. The consultants then would deep dive into the A, B, C, which look promising, and come up with a solution for the same. So that is how they work in tandem with each other. Obviously, with the product-based company, you have a much more end-to-end view of the problem. You not only see the starting of how will you build up to, how you reach the problem statement and build up to the solution, but also a large part is implementation of the same, which could take months to years to do. Whereas in consulting, the engagements are often very short. By my experience, they range anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. So you get something, you become an expert within those 4 to 8 weeks, give a solution, and then you walk away. You typically don't get to be a part of the implementation and the outcome process of this. But yes, one thing that is common across both of them is the ability to adapt to different projects very quickly. In consulting, it would happen as 4 to 6 weeks, and you move on to a new project which has a completely different issue. Whereas in product-based companies, at a time, typically there are 3 or 4 projects going on. They may be longer term, but there are multiple work streams at once, and you have to have a perspective on each one of them, even if they differ in their problem statement quite fundamentally. So I think, and yes, of course, with consulting hours, since the projects are shorter, the hours are much, much longer, and it is very intense. Whereas for a product-based company, though there are intense periods, the working hours are usually more manageable. And yeah, then maybe we can move on to, I can explain a little bit more on what go-to-market strategy, portfolio strategy, and acquisition strategy are. These are three things, these are three areas that I have been working on quite significantly. And the idea for go-to-market strategy is obviously there is a product, it has to be brought to the market, but there are often companies who could be new to that market, or even if they are present, they would like to make a more stronger entry into the market with a particular product. So try to figure out how the commercials would pan out, what are the regulatory hurdles that need to be passed, who are the decision makers, how do you influence them towards your products. So thinking through all of these, typically speaking to physicians and key opinion leaders in that specific field or that specific therapy area is what comes under go-to-market strategy. Portfolio strategy differs from this quite a bit in the sense that it is usually an internal company project where they need to understand that, okay, we have products A, B, and C. We need something that matches with these products in terms of you would want to go to the same kind of doctor to promote all of them so that your costs are limited, or you might have a certain therapy area in mind that that particular company would like to stick to. So it is usually scouting opportunities for these organizations that match their portfolio, see what would be their commercial and their clinical and scientific um, alignment to the current company's portfolio, and then giving them options of, okay, these are the three products that we think you can go after and acquire these. For acquisition strategy, usually is what follows the portfolio strategy. It is typically about finding those three companies and talking to those three companies to help the client acquire them.
Certainly, ma'am. So, from my understanding of your answer to it, it's like when you're in product-based companies, you become master of one trade, but consulting gives you option to juggle between a lot of fields at the same time, so that you can delve into multiple sectors. And when it comes to high-stake games, I think consulting sector might be edging it out. Am I right?
Yes, you are mostly right, because depending on situations, it changes, of course. But yes, that would hold true in most situations.
A follow on the previous question is that this sector has been hugely hit by the pandemic, and so the dynamicity has changed a lot and expectations of people around it. So what does the future hold towards us for it, and how do you think the sector is going to move forward?
Well, yeah. So as you know, COVID is a crisis related to healthcare, right? So healthcare has risen in prominence across for the past year plus that the pandemic has been around for. But apart from that, healthcare is a relatively recession-free sector. It doesn't see too many ups and downs because of the economic crises. So I might look at it as an evergreen sector as well. So it is something that is a good place to be in from my perspective. Obviously, with the pandemic coming in, a lot of things are changing, especially a move towards online platforms or towards digitalization of a lot of endeavors. And these include interactions between doctors and patients, which is consultation, and then between pharmaceutical companies and doctors, which is towards detailing. Earlier it was physical, now it is increasingly moving to online platforms and emails and WhatsApps. Also, IT obviously was always there in healthcare, but it is now starting to boost up because of the current scenario. And the role of AI also has been going up over the past couple of months. AI was already there in healthcare towards clinical trials so that patients can stay at home and they can still be monitored, or towards drug discovery and R&D, where they help find new drugs or molecules for a very specific receptor for a disease, for example. But all of this is obviously sped up quite a bit in the past year. And obviously things like logistics, our supply chain are becoming smarter as well.
Going forward, I think this sector is going to bloom, and a lot of graduates from different colleges want to join this sector. Uh, but given and what you told about the artificial intelligence being part in it, I think most of us were not aware about it, and it would be a really interesting topic if the way healthcare and IT is merging into one. And we're also
It
seeing
is very interesting,
yes, and we are also seeing the
especially
e-commerce
for,
growth in it.
yeah, and especially a lot of things are coming from uh, not only the Western world, the developed world, but a lot of it is being developed in India as well, which is very interesting to see. And it will it's in its very infant stages at this time, but it is bound to grow up and play a very significant role in healthcare.
Yes, ma'am. So that's what we are also aiming for. That how different we can explore more options even during graduation stage. So I would like to take you part down the path for your days in IIFT by asking a question about during your degree at IIFT, you had handful of academics, extracurriculars, and different positions of responsibility. So what advice would you give the current batch for juggling it all and making the best utilization of their time at IIFT right now?
Right. So obviously, I by no means have I'm saying that I did the right things, but I came from a very technical and scientific oriented background. So I was new to the business world and how to approach entering the workforce from the industry point of view, which is why I was very interested in participating in different competitions, take over positions of responsibility to be able to contribute back to the place that was helping me build up, right? So, which is why I took parts in all of these, and obviously academics was important. I wouldn't say it was always easy, but I can't recall a single moment where I did not enjoy it. Obviously, I had help from a lot of friends and colleagues who were there with me during my college time, and obviously professors like Dr. Angarajan and Dr. Sheel, who were extremely supportive throughout all of it. So,
It's true. Even in the virtual run, the friends and colleagues are the only thing that keeps the MBA going on and keeping us sane, holding us that what we need to do, and someone to constantly guide you. That if you're going wrong, hey buddy, let's go check it out and make sure that you're on the right track. So
absolutely. I think one of the biggest things in B school is peer-to-peer learning, and that is what makes place like IFT so unique, right? Everyone comes from different backgrounds, has different kinds of experiences, and you learn from each other.
yes, ma'am. So this is the last question for the interview, and I would like to ask that for the aspiring students who want to enter the pharmaceutical industry at this stage of education, how should they better their skill sets?
Right. So obviously, like I mentioned before, healthcare is a booming sector and it's an evergreen sector. So it is something that will become bigger and more prominent in the economy going ahead. Uh, so it is good to aspire to be there. And obviously there are different verticals within each of the companies, which means that people from different interests and backgrounds can join this as well. But also one thing to note is it is a very technical background. No matter which vertical you are in, without understanding the products, it is difficult to make headwinds in the company. So a little bit of knowledge there would be required, which obviously can be acquired through many routes, including doing some kind of projects or internships or dissertation on a topic within this area. For example, for projects like consumer behavior that I worked on hospitals and healthcare in specific so that I could have some talking points during my interviews with companies. So anything that provides you with talking points is obviously a plus. Apart from that, if someone has genuine interest, there are a lot of reports available not only on India as a market, but globally, different companies and organizations that you can look at to increase your knowledge. And there are some great business cases available on marketing and pricing strategy of products, especially by multinational companies in US and Europe, which are great talking points as well. So it is something that you can read up on. These are available online. So these resources would be great for you to develop your knowledge, which would help you enter this field.
Yes, ma'am. Regarding the pharmaceutical field, it's blooming. And what you told about reading upon articles and companies, even if people who are following stocks of particular company, it gives immense knowledge about how it's going to perform. And since drug industry is heavily correlated to the US markets regarding the approvals and regulations, so I think it really makes a lot of sense for us to build up talking points when we wish to enter such sector.
Absolutely.
On a concluding note, do you have one final piece of advice that you would like to give to students of IIFT?
Well, I would uh, hope and I would request everyone, to stay in touch with each other more often because IFT as a community does not have as strong ties as some of the other B schools have with their colleges. So it is something that we can work on better, and it's my personal endeavor also to be in touch more. I think the podcast that you're doing as a series is a great way of starting that interaction that even alums want to have with their colleges. So yeah, kudos to you and your team for doing the same.
Thank you, ma'am. That's our endeavor. That if we can bring people from all batches together, and for the alumni relations committee to do that, we would like to thank you for your time taking out this for this podcast, and really appreciate the knowledge that you've disseminated, and it will be helping students for the upcoming maybe the job cycle or for their own knowledge. Thank you for your time.
Awesome. Very happy to be here, and thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.